Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville, in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you join us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your friends and family about the Reading with Your Kids podcast. And please subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, Ghana, Himalaya, Good Pods, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Alison McGregor. She is here to celebrate her Grwoing Up Antoinette series. Before we invite Alison into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by A Home for Sally, written by Stanetta Anthony. When Sally entered loving care kennel with her siblings, she was sure they would all be adopted really soon. But Sally looked different from her siblings and the other canines in the kennel. She had a missing left paw. As Sally watched her siblings and other dogs being adopted, her dream of having a family was slowly fading away. Will Sally find a forever home? Join Sally on her quest and find out. Get your copy today. A Home for Sally by Stanetta Anthony. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is also brought to you by Michelle Wagner, the author of the award-winning Mickey on the Move series. These bright-hearted picture books are based on the real-life story of Michelle's son, Mickey, who has a severe hearing loss. These books take readers through Mickey's journey navigating life with a cochlear implant as he defies boundaries and thrives while living with a disability. Follow Mickey's latest adventure in Mickey on the Move Farming and find out how technology helps Mickey to hear and appreciate the beautiful sounds in nature without the worry of weather dampening his day. Purchase these books at michellewagnerauthor.com. Join us right now from Innisfil in Ontario in the beautiful nation of Canada. Our guest today is here to celebrate her brand new picture book. It's a series. It's called Grwoing Up Antoinette. Please welcome to the show the author, Alison McGregor. Hey, Alison, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Really excited to learn about this series. As I understand it, there are two books in the series. The original, the first was Antoinette and the Story of the Jellyfish Monster, and the latest book is Antoinette and the Story of the Invisible Giraffes. Am I right?
That's right, yep.
And Antoinette is actually, the story of Antoinette is based on your mom.
It is, yep. The real Antoinette Barbour. She goes by Tony, so even earlier when you were asking me proper pronunciation, I mean, I barely know because it's only when my dad is really angry with her that the full name comes out.
You know, it's wonderful when we discover that, cultures all around the world share the same behaviors. When we get mad at somebody, the whole name comes out.
And it really shakes you to the core when that happens. So, it's a worldwide phenomenon.
So, your mom sounds pretty amazing. Encountering jellyfish monsters and invisible giraffes. Tell me about her.
She had the most amazing, wild childhood and was never the type to, brag might be the wrong word for it, but she was just kind of like, oh, this is just something that happened to me. Oh, yes, no, we had lion attacks in our backyard quite frequently, and elephants tend to be jerks if they come in the middle of the road. They take forever to leave, and says all of these things like it's a very natural, normal thing for, a little girl growing up in Canadian suburban neighborhoods to know all about. So she had two parents who were Scottish, and her dad, my grandfather, was an engineer, had a taste for adventure, so loved to go to these far off, not very well-known places, and worked for companies like Seagram's or other sugar manufacturing plants that often took them to these hot, exotic places. And he would bring my little mom in tow with her for the ride.
That's really, really neat. What was the first far-off exotic place that your mom lived?
So she was born in St. Kitts and Nevis. So right off the hop, it's much cooler than Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, being born on a tropical island. And then from there, she moved to Pakistan, then Jamaica, then Tanzania, and then shipped off to boarding school in Scotland in between. So, lots of crazy places. And I think there's some Indonesia sprinkled in there somewhere, but I'm not quite sure of the timeline on that exactly.
Wow. Now, did you have the chance to visit some of the places that your mom lived when you were growing up?
I'd love to. It's on my bucket list to make a trip and go with my mom and revisit all of these places. We just haven't quite got around to it yet. And COVID threw a wrench in some of those plans as well. But I mean, I think maybe the silver lining is my daughter's 3 right now. Maybe when she's a little older, all 3 of us can go and we can make it a 3-generation trip, which would be really fantastic.
That would be fantastic. So tell us about this invisible giraffe that your mom encountered.
Yes. So this is one of my favorites, that she would tell when I was growing up. And we hear these stories around nap time or bedtime in between Harry Potter chapters usually. So it was her first trip meeting her parents in their new home in Tanzania. They flew into Dar es Salaam and then would travel, I think it was an 8-hour drive or so, through Mikumi National Park, long winding dirt roads, basically a safari tour that people pay really good money for now. And she was so excited to see giraffes because it was something that if you're lucky enough to go to the city zoo, you might be able to see one. But other than that, it's the stuff of books and your imagination, really. So she was so excited to see one and really had tunnel vision the whole way, really keeping her eye out for one. But we'll have to read to find out whether or not she did see them or if they are invisible, according to Antoinette.
It's funny with, we've had an author on, Leah Fisher has been on the show a couple of times, and she writes about cryptids, the mysterious creatures that may or may not exist, like the Loch Ness Monster and Champy, the monster that lives maybe in Lake Champlain, and Bigfoot. But a lot of these creatures that, are giraffes and lions and elephants and things like that, for folks growing up with your mom, these could have been cryptids because if you didn't see them at a zoo, you just had to take somebody's word on it that they existed.
Exactly. And imagine trying to describe a giraffe to somebody. I mean, it's a really hard sell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You also wrote in the first book about jellyfish and being attacked, or the story of the jellyfish monster. What's this one all about?
Yeah, so that is the first book in this series that started it all. And my mom still to this day has a very mischievous attitude, doesn't much like waiting in line or being told what to do. So being left to her own devices on a beach one afternoon in Jamaica, she saw an opportunity to beat the line off of the diving platform in the ocean, and that may or may not have been a big mistake, and it may or may not have created a monster because of it.
Your mom sounds like a lot of fun. Does she still have the energy and mischievousness that she had as a girl?
Absolutely, yes. She really puts me to shame. She can stay up later than me, party harder than me. And I've always just been really envious at how she never lost that mischievousness and never lost that curiosity too. So she's always asking the whys and the hows and making those connections around her. And I'm just so impressed by that because I'm very much the person who would stop talking immediately in class and was too scared to get in trouble by the teacher, so I wouldn't question anything. So we're very different in that regard, but it is something that I'm completely envious of within my mom.
I don't know how to quite frame this question without it sounding like an insult. I don't mean it to sound like an insult, but was your mom ever disappointed that you didn't get in trouble at school? Did she ever say, hey, throw some chalk around?
You know what? I have a younger brother, and that was kind of his duty.
Oh,
so
okay.
I think maybe a bit relieved that it wasn't two kids getting in trouble all the time. Sorry to my brother to throw you under the bus there.
Well, that's what brothers are for.
Especially younger ones.
Yes, indeed. As I'm sitting here talking and laughing with you about these stories, I'm imagining how much fun it would be sitting down with my kids when they were 4, 5, 6 years old and reading these stories. I think it would just be like an easy way to just ignite our imaginations and just ask them to picture what kind of invisible beast might be lurking in our basement or what kind of monster might be swimming out in our pool.
Exactly. And it's been such a great way for my daughter to connect to her granny, my mom. And it just, her stories are just so naturally wild and outlandish that we're lucky that it's easier to engage in to get that imaginative spark going. But we try our best to leave everything open-ended so that my kids have to fill in the gaps. They choose the answers, and then it turns into a build your own adventure kind of experience. And I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more about that? And so parents who are listening can also engage kids in conversations that are kind of open-ended and really invite kids to fill in those blanks and create their own endings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, to avoid going absolutely insane during all of our COVID lockdowns, we did a lot of outside time with my kids. So we really started with connecting with nature with these sort of open-ended questions. So it would be something like, can you hear the birds chirping? What color do you think they are? How big do you think they are? What do you think they're saying to each other right now? And, do you think that they're saying that to the foxes hiding down there? Are there bears down there? And then everything kind of snowballs from there. And it's turned into dragons living down at the end of our street now. So, it's a pretty exciting neighborhood now.
I guess. And Alison was sharing with me before we started recording that where she lives, the temperature drops down to minus 40 Celsius in the wintertime. So I'm imagining one of the things that I might think if I was there was, how am I still alive?
You know what? When I'm halfway through my walks at the end of the day with my dog, I often think that same thing. And it's like, will I get home? I'm not sure.
But I love the idea of going out and having those open-ended questions, especially when there's no right or wrong answer. It's just, what do you think? And I think that those words, when we say those simple words to our kids, what do you think? And we allow them to finish an answer for us, I think it's incredibly empowering. Because we forget sometimes how important we are in the eyes of our kids, even though they're making us crazy and they're acting like they're angry at us and that we're the last person in the world. they want to be with. We are, in fact, as parents, we are the most important person in our kids' lives. And they desire so much to have our approval. And when we demonstrate to them that they are important to us by saying, I want to know what you're thinking. Your opinion is valuable to me. I really want to know what you're thinking, what you're all about. That's showing them that we care about them, that they matter to us. And I think that's a really important lesson for us to teach our kids.
Exactly. Yeah. You really hit that on the nose, because I find my children have been growing up, they have a great sense of self-confidence because of that. They've developed a great sense of independence, which can be a pro and a con in some situations in toddlerdom. And yeah, it's treating them as a person. And I think that really goes a long way in the end.
You know, treating kids like they're a person. It's such a simple, kind of like, of course, but a lot of times we don't. We treat them like they're little kids or like they're dolls or like there's something that needs to be protected. And our kids are special and they are our little dolls and they do need to be protected. But they're also people. And we need to remember that we need to treat them like people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And, sometimes my kids especially really like to put themselves in precarious situations. Mm-hmm. And now I'm at the point where I have to triage, is this going to be a lesson learned if they're to fall off the chair, or is this super dangerous and I need to intervene sort of thing? Because, they really like to swing from chandeliers type thing. So, there's too many crazy situations that they end up in for me to say no all the time. Mm-hmm. They kind of need to build up their own danger gauge, I guess, for themselves. Yeah. So super fun. Lots of Band-Aids.
Yeah. Well, I that's why they were invented. And I think it's also important. We've talked a lot here on the program about parents, with great intentions, doing everything they can to make sure their kids don't experience any bumps and bruises, don't experience any disappointments in life. And number one, that's impossible to do. But number two, I don't think it's helpful, because I think we all learn from the bumps and bruises and scars that we acquire over our lifetimes. We learn from our disappointments. And if we're there to help our kids pick themselves up after they fall down, that's a really valuable lesson. And it's probably more valuable than having prevented them from falling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's helping them build their emotional tool belt, their toolkit. So as they grow older, they've had these experiences and they've had hopefully healthy ways with dealing with that disappointment or hurt or whatever that might be. And then they can deal with it best way, most positive way possible moving forward, sort of thing. At least that's my idea that I'm trying to do on my end.
Yeah. And I'm imagining your great-grandmother and great-grandfather may have heard some people in the family or their friends grumbling like, hey, you can't take your kid to Pakistan. You can't take your kid to Tanzania. There are invisible jellyfish monster giraffes in Tanzania. Your kid might get eaten.
Exactly. So I never had the opportunity to know them and have only heard a few stories, but I think my grandfather especially was happy to have the distance between him and his in-laws so he wouldn't have to hear that all of the time.
We'll leave that alone. We don't want to incriminate anybody. What does your mom think about you documenting her life in a series of picture books?
So I started this as sort of a surprise for my mom. And the book was just supposed to be a one-off passion project. And then it did this wonderful spiral into this series. And I'm so happy that it did, because this is so much fun. But, she was in complete shock. She had no idea I was doing this. And the best part of it was she had no idea how much her stories resonated with me and, you know, where they sat with me over all of these years. So that was a thrill to have that realization dawn on her as well. And it's just been such a wonderful legacy to leave. I think her stories are so unique and different and celebrate kids being kids. And it's just so nice to be able to share that with the world. And she is not on social media really, so she doesn't know how many people also enjoy her book. So I like filling her in from time to time, and she's just completely chuffed with the whole idea. So it's so fun to be able to give her this experience and, you know, kind of make up for me maybe not appreciating it as much vocally when I was younger, when she originally told these stories. So maybe a prolonged apology a little bit too.
Well, it just reminds me that our stories that we lived, our lives, they may not have been as exotic as living in Tanzania or Pakistan or being born in the Caribbean, but we have stories that our kids will find fascinating. And if we take the time after we read Antoinette and sit down and talk about the book and talk about the stories, I'm imagining our kids might turn to us and say, what was it like when you were growing up? And I really encourage families to tell those stories. Even if you have to embellish them a little bit to make them more interesting, tell those stories. Because, again, it's a great way for us to encourage our kids to remember and tell their own stories. I've shared on the podcast a number of times that I love that my daughter, who's now 25, anytime that her and I were out and we did a lot of traveling around the United States together, anytime we encountered a difficult situation, something that a lot of people would freak out about, she would turn to me in the middle of it and say, this is going to make a good story someday. Once we get through this is going to make a great story. And that takes a lot of the stress and the tension and the anxiety out of a situation, just being able to sit back and say, yeah, stuff's happening right now that I would prefer not to happen, but it's okay. It's going to make for a great story.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It makes a stressful situation have the edge taken off a little bit. And yeah, and then it's fun to retell it and kind of reshape it a little bit afterwards too. And it is such an art. I mean, if you get somebody telling you a good story or, it's wedding season right now, getting those good speeches in, it's a talent, and I'm here for it. I love a good story.
Yeah. Well, I know that people are excited about these first two books. Are there more adventures coming from Antoinette?
I sure hope so. I have one that I'm working on from her time in Pakistan where some British royalty is involved. So hopefully I can get that underway soon, and I can make this a trilogy. Awesome.
Well, I know people are going to want to know where they can go to find out more about you and find out more about Growing Up Antoinette.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram at the Alison McGregor. My website is growingupantoinette.com, and you can find my books on Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to the day that when I get up to Ontario there, that we'll see all sorts of Antoinette houses and shops and gift shops, just like when you go to Prince Edward Island, you just see Anne of Green Gables everywhere. That would be a lot of fun.
It would be. You know what? I'll keep my fingers and toes crossed that when you make it up here, I'll have that happening for you.
Awesome. We've had a great time speaking to the author of Growing Up Antoinette, Alison McGregor. Hey, Alison, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a treat.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. One of our favorite guests is returning to the show. Shannon Anderson. She'll be here to celebrate her middle grade novel, Not What I Signed Up For. That's the next episode of the podcast. Hey, if you're the author of a fantastic children's book, whether it's a board book, picture book, middle grade novel, YA title, or even a parenting book, we would love to help you celebrate that book with the world. Being an author means that you are the CEO of your book business. It can be really daunting. We want to let you know that you don't have to do everything by yourself. We can help you celebrate your book in so many different ways. You can be a guest here on the podcast and tell the world about your book in a long-form conversation. You can submit your book to our Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read panel, and if they believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, parents are going to know that your book is worth a place on their family bookshelf. And we can also have you take part in our monthly promotion program and celebrate your book with commercials here on the podcast, with messages to our 99,000 plus social media followers, display your book on our nationwide network of digital pedestrian billboards, and celebrate your book at whatever live event we happen to be at. In August of 2022, we're going to be at the Buttonwood Park Zoo in New Bedford, Massachusetts, celebrating our 1500th episode. In September, we're going to be at the PTO Today PTO Today Expo in St. Louis, Missouri. And in October, we will be at the Orange County Children's Book Festival out in Orange County, Los Angeles, California. Find out all about this and more by going to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, clicking on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page, and scrolling on down to our different services. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Alison McGregor. Please be sure to check out Grwoing Up Antoinette. Also want to thank our sponsors, A Home for Sally by Stanetta Anthony, and Mickey on the Move, Farming, written by Michelle Wagner. I want to thank my amazing team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Nicole Belcastro, Mirabella Q, Rain Pan. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.